Hashtag the Silent Watchers. The grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched across nearly a kilometer of polished obsidian flooring, its crystalline dome reaching toward the stars of the Andromeda sector. Representatives from over 300 civilizations filled the tiered seating arrangements, each species displaying their finest ceremonial attire and most impressive technological augmentations. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert the cacophony of alien languages into something resembling coherent discourse. At the center of this magnificent chaos sat the humans. They occupied exactly 12 seats in the rear section of the assembly hall, a small cluster of unremarkable bipeds wearing simple dark clothing. No ceremonial plumage like the Zephyrian delegates. No bioluminescent displays like the Crystalline Collective. No floating meditation spheres like the Ethereal Council. Just 12 humans sitting quietly, their faces impassive, their technology apparently non-existent. Ambassador Kethvar of the Hegemony Coalition raised his 4 arms dramatically, his voice booming through the translation matrix. Esteemed beings of the galaxy, we gather today to discuss the growing threat of the Void Devourers at our Outer Rim territories. These parasitic machines have consumed 17 star systems in the past cycle, and their hunger shows no signs of abating. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The Zephyrians clicked their beaks nervously. The Crystalline Collective's forms dimmed with worry. The Ethereal Council's meditation spheres wobbled slightly. The Coalition has prepared a comprehensive battle strategy, Kethvar continued, gesturing toward a massive holographic display that materialized above the chamber. Star charts, fleet movements, and tactical formations danced in the air with dazzling complexity. Our combined fleets number in the millions. Our weapons can crack planets. Our shields can withstand stellar bombardment. Enthusiastic chirps and howls of approval echoed from various species. The warrior clans of Proxima beat their chest plates in rhythmic approval. The Machine Collective's representatives emitted harmonic frequencies of agreement. In the back, the humans remained silent. Supreme Chancellor Veldar, a towering figure from the ancient Confederation, rose from his throne-like chair. His species had ruled star systems when most others were still discovering fire, and his authority was absolute in the assembly. The plan appears sound, Ambassador Kethvar. What resources do each species commit to this glorious campaign? One by one, the great powers of the galaxy stood to announce their contributions. The Zephyrian Star Empire pledged 1,000 dreadnoughts. The Crystalline Collective offered their reality-warping defensive matrices. The Ethereal Council promised their mind-bridge communication networks that could coordinate fleets across light years instantaneously. Each announcement drew cheers and applause. The holographic display updated constantly, showing the growing armada that would face the Void Devourers. Projected casualty rates dropped from catastrophic to merely devastating as more species added their forces to the coalition. The excitement built to a crescendo until Chancellor Veldar's gaze fell upon the small human contingent in the rear. And what do our newest members contribute to this vital effort? His tone carried the barely concealed condescension that had become standard when addressing humanity. Perhaps some of your quaint chemical rockets? Or maybe those charming kinetic weapons you seem so fond of. Laughter erupted throughout the chamber. The warrior clans roared with amusement. Several crystalline beings actually formed shapes resembling human vessels, crude and primitive compared to their own elegant designs. Even the usually stoic Machine Collective emitted what could only be described as electronic chuckles. Dr. Sarah Chun, the lead human representative, stood slowly. She was a small woman by galactic standards, barely reaching the shoulder height of most species present. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore what appeared to be an ordinary black suit with no visible technology or enhancement. "We appreciate the invitation to participate," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the absence of any obvious amplification device. However, humanity respectfully declines to commit forces to this operation. The laughter died instantly, replaced by shocked silence. In the 3-century history of the Galactic Assembly, no species had ever refused to contribute to a joint defense initiative. Ambassador Kethvar's facial tentacles writhed in disbelief. "You refuse? The Void Devourers threaten all life in this galaxy. including your insignificant little star system. How can you refuse to defend yourselves? We didn't say we wouldn't defend ourselves, Dr. Chen replied calmly. We said we declined to participate in your operation. Supreme Chancellor Velvar leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing. Perhaps the humans lack the courage for real warfare? Your species has been notably peaceful since joining our assembly. Some might say passive. More snickers echoed through the chamber. The humans had indeed been remarkably quiet members of galactic society. They attended meetings, participated in trade agreements, and generally kept to themselves. Their technology appeared decades behind even the youngest spacefaring civilizations. Their military, such as it was, consisted of a handful of primitive vessels that barely qualified as system defense craft. We understand your concern, Dr. Chen said, seemingly unbothered by the mockery. But we believe this approach is fundamentally flawed. Flawed? Kethvar's voice rose to a near shriek. This strategy was developed by the finest military minds in the galaxy, species that have waged war among the stars for millennia. And yet the Void Devourers continue to advance, Dr. Chen observed. 17 systems consumed despite your finest military minds. Perhaps the problem isn't insufficient firepower. The warrior clan's leader, General Krexthor, stood abruptly. His massive frame, enhanced with biomechanical armor, towered over even the elevated podium. Are you suggesting that warriors who have conquered solar systems don't understand combat? Your species hasn't fought a significant war in over a century. That's correct, Dr. Chen acknowledged. We haven't. Then, sit down and let the real soldiers handle this, General Krexthor snarled. Your cowardice is noted and expected. Dr. Chen remained standing, her expression unchanged. We're not cowards, General. We're just thorough. Something in her tone made several of the more perceptive species pause their laughter. The Ethereal Council's meditation spheres stopped bobbing. A few members of the machine collective turned their sensors more intently toward the human delegation. Supreme Chancellor Velvar raised his hand for silence. Explain this thoroughness, human. What do you believe we're missing? You're fighting the symptoms, not the disease, Dr. Chen replied. The Void Devourers aren't a conventional enemy. They're a tool. And you haven't asked the important question, who's wielding that tool? Ambassador Kethvar scoffed. They're obviously autonomous war machines from some dead civilization. Standard galactic hazard. We've dealt with such things before. Have you traced their origin point? Dr. Chen asked. Unnecessary. General Krexthor interjected. Destroy them before they spread further. Origin is irrelevant. Is it? Dr. Chen's voice remained level, but something shifted in her posture. The other human representatives sat a little straighter, their eyes becoming more alert. Because our preliminary analysis suggests they're not autonomous at all. They're being directed, controlled, by something that understands galactic military doctrine very, very well. The chamber fell silent. This was the first substantive contribution humanity had made to any assembly discussion since their admission. Chancellor Velvar's ancient brain, honed by centuries of political survival, began to sense undercurrents he hadn't noticed before. You've been studying these entities? We study everything, Dr. Chen said simply. It's what we do. With what resources? Ambassador Kethvar demanded. Your technology is barely advanced enough for interstellar travel. Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since standing. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Is it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Several species began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The humans had been so quiet, so unremarkable, that most of the assembly had simply assumed they understood everything about Earth's capabilities. Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, we've identified the control nexus for the Void Devourers. We know where the real enemy is hiding. General Krexthor laughed, but it sounded forced. Impossible. Our best scouts have been searching for their base for months. If we can't find it, how could you? Because you've been looking in the wrong place, Dr. Chen replied. You've been searching in space. The control nexus is somewhere you'd never think to look. Somewhere you couldn't reach even if you knew where it was. The silence stretched longer this time. The political and military leaders of hundreds of civilizations found themselves hanging on the words of a species they dismissed as irrelevant. Supreme Chancellor Velvar's voice was carefully controlled when he spoke. Where? Dr. Chen's smile grew wider. And For the first time, several assembly members noticed that her eyes held depths they hadn't perceived before. Behind her, the other human representatives remained perfectly still, perfectly quiet. But their presence suddenly felt different. Less like observers and more like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. That, Dr. Chen said softly, would be telling. She sat down, and the human delegation returned to their previous state of apparent insignificance. But the damage was done. Doubt had been planted in the minds of every species present. Questions that had never occurred to them before began to surface. How much did they really know about humanity? What had the humans been doing in their quiet little corner of the galaxy? And, most disturbing of all, what else might they be hiding behind that unremarkable facade? The assembly continued its discussions, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. The humans remained silent in the rear, but their silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like patience. And, as the great powers of the galaxy argued about fleet compositions and battle strategies, none of them noticed the small devices that several human representatives quietly activated. Devices that began recording everything said in the chamber with a precision that would have impressed even the machine collective. The humans were indeed thorough, and they were no longer content to simply watch. Hashtag the unraveling 3 standard galactic days after the assembly meeting. The first anomaly was detected by the Zephyrian monitoring station at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. Senior technician Vrianael had been tracking routine merchant traffic when her instruments registered something impossible, a massive energy signature moving at velocities that should have torn any known material apart. The signature lasted exactly 2.3 seconds before vanishing completely. Vrianael ran the readings through every diagnostic protocol in the Zephyrian database. The instruments were functioning perfectly. The energy spike had been real, and it had been moving faster than anything in recorded galactic history. More disturbing still, the trajectory analysis showed it had come from the direction of Earth's solar system. By the time she finished her report, similar anomalies were being detected across 17 different monitoring stations spanning 3 galactic sectors. All showed the same impossible readings. All traced back to the same seemingly primitive star system that housed humanity. The reports reached Supreme Chancellor Veldar within 6 hours. His ancient mind, which had navigated galactic politics for longer than some civilizations had existed, immediately understood the implications. The humans weren't just hiding something. They were hiding everything. Emergency sessions were called. The great powers of the galaxy demanded immediate explanations. Ambassador Kethvar of the Hegemony Coalition was particularly vocal in his denunciations of human deception. General Krexthor of the warrior clan spoke of invasion and subjugation. The machine collective calculated probability matrices that painted increasingly grim scenarios for galactic security. Dr. Sarah Chun received the summons for an immediate emergency audience with characteristic calm. When she arrived at the Chancellor's private chambers, she found representatives from the 7 major galactic powers waiting for her. Their expressions ranged from anger to fear to barely controlled hostility. "Explain," Chancellor Veldar said without preamble. "Our sensors detect massive energy movements from your system. Movements that suggest technology far beyond what you've revealed to this assembly." Dr. Chen settled into the provided chair with the same unremarkable composure she'd shown during the main assembly session. "You're asking the wrong question, Chancellor." "Then, what is the right question?" Ambassador Kethvar demanded, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "The right question is, why are you only detecting it now?" The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. General Krexthor was the first to grasp the meaning. "You've been masking your capabilities." "Not masking," Dr. Chen corrected. "Simply not advertising them. There's a difference." "For how long?" Chancellor Veldar's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Since before we made first contact with galactic civilization," Dr. Chun replied matter-of-factly. "We found it useful to understand the neighborhood before introducing ourselves properly." The revelation hit the assembled leaders like a physical blow. Humanity had been space-capable and potentially dangerous for longer than anyone had suspected. Every assumption about human development, human capabilities, and human intentions suddenly crumbled. Representative Zyxandra of the Machine Collective, her chrome features utterly expressionless, spoke with mechanical precision. Our calculations indicate that to achieve the energy signatures we detected, your civilization would require technological capabilities equivalent to Type 3 on the Kardashev scale. This suggests harnessing the power of entire star systems. Your calculations are accurate, Dr. Chen confirmed. The room erupted in chaos. Accusations flew in a dozen languages. Several species activated emergency protocols, preparing to alert their home worlds of the potential threat. General Krexthor actually reached for his ceremonial weapon before catching himself. Chancellor Veldhar's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Silence. The room fell still instantly. The ancient leader's eyes never left Dr. Chen's face. If you possess such power, why hide it? Why endure the mockery and dismissal? Dr. Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. A subtle straightening, a slight squaring of shoulders. For the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, she looked like someone who wasn't asking for permission. Because, Chancellor, we learned a long time ago that the strong who announce their strength invite challenges. The strong who hide their strength, they invite underestimation. And underestimation is the most powerful weapon in the universe. You've been studying us, Representative Velketh of the Crystalline Collective said, his crystalline form dimming with realization. All this time, you've been learning our weaknesses. We've been learning everything, Dr. Chen confirmed. Your military doctrines, your political structures, your economic dependencies, your psychological profiles, your technological limitations. 3 years is a long time to watch and listen. Ambassador Kethvar's face had turned an unhealthy shade of purple. This is espionage, infiltration, acts of war. No, Dr. Chen said calmly. This is due diligence. And, frankly, we're disappointed in what we found. The insult hung in the air like a challenge. General Krexthor's massive frame trembled with barely controlled rage. Disappointed? You dare judge civilizations that ruled the stars when your species was still learning to make fire? Yes, we dare, Dr. Chen replied. And, for the first time, steel entered her voice. Because despite all your experience, despite all your power, despite all your supposed wisdom, you're about to lose this galaxy to an enemy you don't understand, using tactics you can't counter, for reasons you haven't even considered. She stood, and somehow the simple motion carried more authority than General Krexthor's war displays or Chancellor Veldhar's political gravitas. The Void Devourers aren't some random machine plague, she continued. They're a test, a probe. Someone wanted to see how galactic civilization would respond to an existential threat. And you failed that test spectacularly. Failed. Chancellor Veldhar's ancient pride finally cracked. We mobilized the greatest armada in galactic history. You mobilized exactly what they wanted you to mobilize, Dr. Chen corrected. You gathered your fleets in predictable patterns, using predictable tactics, following predictable strategies. You're about to march into the most obvious trap in military history. And you can't see it because you're too busy congratulating yourselves on your coordination. Representative ZYX Sandra's mechanical brain was already running calculations. You believe the Void Devourers are deliberately herding our forces into a specific engagement pattern. I don't believe it, Dr. Chen said. I know it, because we've been tracking the real enemy for 2 years. The room fell silent again. This time, the silence carried a weight of dawning comprehension. Who? Chancellor Veldhar asked. The architects, Dr. Chen replied. A civilization that makes your oldest species look like infants. They've been dormant in dark space for approximately 50,000 years. The Void Devourers are their scout units, designed to provoke exactly the kind of response you're planning. They want you to gather every ship, every weapon, every defensive system in the galaxy into one massive fleet. Why? General Krexthor demanded. Because that makes it easier to destroy everything at once, Dr. Chen explained with clinical detachment. One decisive battle, one overwhelming defeat, and then they inherit a galaxy cleared of all effective resistance. The implications crashed down on the assembled leaders like a collapsing star. Everything they thought they knew about the threat was wrong. Every strategy they developed was playing into enemy hands. Every preparation they'd made was actually advancing their own destruction. You've known this for 2 years, Ambassador Kethvar said, his voice hollow with shock. You let us walk into this trap. We let you choose your own path, Dr. Chen corrected. We hoped you might figure it out on your own. We hoped that species with thousands of years of experience might recognize a classic strategic manipulation. We were wrong. But you have a solution, Chancellor Veldar said. It wasn't a question. Dr. Chen's smile returned, and this time it carried predatory satisfaction. Yes, we do. She activated a small device, and the room's holographic projectors came to life without anyone's permission. The display that materialized showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but it was unlike anything the assembled leaders had ever seen. It showed energy flows they hadn't known existed, hidden installations they'd never detected, and movement patterns that revealed the true scope of the architect threat. The architects expect you to fight them in space, Dr. Chen explained as the display zoomed in on specific sectors. They've prepared for space-based warfare. They've counted on space-based thinking. But they made one critical error. The display focused on what appeared to be empty space, then zoomed further until a massive structure became visible. It was clearly artificial, but it resembled no known architecture or technology. They assumed that because every galactic civilization fights in space, every galactic civilization thinks in space, Dr. Chen continued. They never considered that one species might approach warfare from a completely different perspective. General Krex Thor leaned forward, his military mind finally beginning to grasp the implications. What kind of perspective? Dr. Chen's smile became genuinely terrifying. The kind that comes from a species that spent most of its evolutionary history as persistence hunters. We don't fight for territory, General. We don't fight for resources. We don't even fight for survival. She paused, letting the tension build. We fight to make absolutely certain that our enemy never, ever gets back up. The room erupted in questions and demands for details, but Dr. Chen was already moving toward the door. She paused at the threshold and turned back to address the most powerful beings in galactic civilization. The human fleet will deploy in 72 hours, she announced. We suggest you stay out of our way. As the door closed behind her, the assembled leaders were left staring at the holographic display that continued to reveal the true scope of humanity's knowledge and preparation. And, for the first time in their long, proud histories, the masters of the galaxy realized they were about to witness what it meant when humanity stopped hiding. #The awakening. The human fleet that emerged from Earth's solar system 72 hours later defied every principle of physics the galactic community thought they understood. Where the assembled powers had expected to see crude chemical rockets or primitive fusion drives, they instead witnessed vessels that moved like living things through the void of space. The ships bent reality around themselves, creating corridors of twisted space-time that allowed them to traverse impossible distances in heartbeats. But it wasn't just the technology that shattered galactic assumptions. It was the numbers. What had appeared to be a small defensive force protecting a single-star system revealed itself as an armada that dwarfed the combined fleets of 300 civilizations. Thousands of vessels materialized from what sensors had previously registered as empty space. Entire battle groups that had been hiding in plain sight, their stealth capabilities so advanced that they had been completely invisible to the most sophisticated detection arrays in the galaxy. Supreme Chancellor Veldar watched the deployment from the bridge of his flagship, his ancient mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. Beside him, representatives from every major power stood in stunned silence as their instruments detected energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible. How long have they been there? General Krex Thor whispered, his warrior's pride crumbling as he realized that humanity had been surrounding them for years without anyone knowing. Since before first contact, Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication array. She was aboard the lead human vessel, a ship so large that it created its own gravitational field. We wanted to be sure you were the kind of neighbors worth knowing. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't stumbled into galactic civilization as primitive newcomers seeking guidance. They had deliberately chosen to reveal themselves, and they had done so only after conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in recorded history. The Architect command structure is located here, Dr. Chun continued, transmitting coordinates that place the enemy far beyond the edge of known space. They've been observing galactic civilization from dark space, feeding information to their Void Devourer scouts, and preparing for a harvesting operation that would eliminate all significant resistance in a single coordinated strike. Ambassador Kethvar's tentacles writhed with confusion and growing terror. But the distances involved, it would take our fastest ships months to reach those coordinates. By then, their main force will have already launched. Your fastest ships, yes, Dr. Chen agreed. But we're not using your technology. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the moment when humanity revealed the true extent of their capabilities. The human fleet didn't accelerate toward their target. They didn't engage their drives or prepare for a long journey across interstellar space. Instead, reality simply folded around them. One moment, they were visible on sensors throughout the local galactic cluster. The next moment they were gone, having stepped outside normal spacetime entirely. The energy signature of their departure registered on instruments across dozens of star systems. A gravitational shockwave that announced to the entire galaxy that the humans were no longer hiding. Representative Zyxandra of the Machine Collective, her mechanical brain working at maximum capacity, finally understood the scope of human deception. They've been using pocket dimension technology. They exist partially outside our reality. That's how they remained hidden. That's how they've been watching us. Not just watching, Chancellor Veldar realized. Learning, adapting, preparing. The human fleet materialized at the coordinates Dr. Chun had specified, emerging from folded space into a region that galactic surveys had marked as empty void. But it wasn't empty. As their sensors adjusted to the new environment, the combined galactic fleets detected something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. The Architect installation was massive beyond comprehension. It wasn't a space station or even a megastructure. It was an artificial dimension, a constructed reality that existed parallel to normal space. Entire solar systems had been converted into computational matrices. Planets had been transformed into weapons that could destroy stars. The scope of their engineering made the greatest achievements of galactic civilization look like children's toys. And it was ancient, unimaginably ancient. The architects hadn't been dormant for 50,000 years. They had been dormant for 50 million years, waiting for galactic civilization to develop to the point where it was worth harvesting. Now you understand. Dr. Chin's voice carried across the communication networks as the human fleet took position around the Architect construct. This isn't about the Void Devourers. This isn't about territorial expansion or resource acquisition. This is about a species so advanced that they view entire galactic civilizations as crops to be harvested when they reach maturity. The Architect response was immediate and overwhelming. Weapons that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding lashed out at the human fleet. Energy beams that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Gravity wells that could crush matter into exotic states. Reality disruptors that simply deleted sections of space-time from existence. Any conventional fleet would have been vaporized instantly. The human ships danced through the assault like they were choreographed to the attacks. Their movements weren't just evasive, they were predictive. They knew where the next wave of destruction would manifest, and were already moving to counter it before the weapons had finished charging. Impossible, General Krexthor breathed. No one can predict weapons operating on those principles. They can if they've been studying Architect technology for decades, Dr. Chen replied calmly. We told you we were thorough. We didn't mention that we've been infiltrating their systems since we first detected their presence. The revelation hit the assembled galactic leaders like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just discovered the Architects. They had been conducting a covert intelligence war against them for longer than most species had known the enemy existed. But the true shock came when the human fleet began their counterattack. The weapons they deployed operated on principles that even the Architects seemed surprised by. Instead of trying to match the enemy's overwhelming technological superiority, humanity had developed something entirely different. Their weapons didn't attack matter or energy, or even space-time itself. They attacked information. The human vessels released clouds of what appeared to be microscopic particles, but as they made contact with the Architect construct, the truth became clear. Each particle was a self-replicating information virus, designed to infiltrate and corrupt the computational matrices that formed the foundation of Architect technology. The effect was devastating. Weapons systems turned against their operators. Defensive fields began consuming the structures they were meant to protect. The artificial dimension itself began to unravel as its fundamental programming was systematically rewritten. How? Representative Velketh of the Crystalline Collective managed to ask through the chaos of the battle. "We learned from you," Dr. Chen explained, her voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. "Every species we encountered taught us something valuable. The Zephyrians showed us how to manipulate information flow. The Machine Collective demonstrated the principles of technological integration. The crystalline beings revealed the mathematics of dimensional folding. The Ethereal Council taught us about consciousness transfer protocols. The pieces began falling into place for the watching galactic leaders. Humanity hadn't been passive observers during their 3 years in galactic society. They had been students, learning everything they could from every species they encountered. More than that, they had been synthesizing that knowledge into something entirely new. You used our own discoveries against an enemy we didn't even know existed," Chancellor Veldar said, awe creeping into his ancient voice. "We used your discoveries to save galactic civilization from an enemy that would have enslaved or destroyed every thinking being in this galaxy," Dr. Chen corrected. "The architects have been harvesting galaxies for eons. This would have been just another collection for them. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over within hours. The architect construct, which had taken millions of years to build and had been designed to last until the heat death of the universe, was systematically dismantled by human technology that turned its own complexity against it. The ancient intelligences that had slumbered in dark space for geological ages found themselves deleted from existence by information weapons they had never imagined possible. As the human fleet began the process of ensuring that no architect technology remained functional, the assembled galactic powers finally understood what they had witnessed. They had seen what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be harmless. "This changes everything," Ambassador Kethvar said, his earlier hostility replaced by something approaching reverence. "No," Dr. Chen replied as the human fleet began its return journey to known space. "This changes nothing. We're still the same species we were yesterday. We still want the same things we wanted yesterday. Peace, prosperity, the chance to learn and grow alongside our galactic neighbors. But now we know what you're capable of," General Krextor pointed out. "Now you know what we're capable of when our neighbors are threatened by something that wants to destroy them," Dr. Chen corrected. "The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" The silence that followed lasted for several long minutes, as the most powerful beings in galactic civilization contemplated the implications of what they had learned. Humanity possessed technology that could have conquered the galaxy years ago. They had the strategic capabilities to have manipulated galactic politics from the beginning. They had the intelligence networks to know every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability of every species. And they had chosen to sit quietly in the back of the assembly hall, asking for nothing more than the chance to participate as equals. "Why?" Chancellor Veldar finally asked. "Why hide all of this? Why endure our condescension and mockery? You could have taken anything you wanted." Dr. Chen's response carried the weight of human philosophy distilled into its purest form. "Because, Chancellor, we didn't want to take anything. We wanted to earn our place among the stars. We wanted to prove that strength used wisely is more valuable than strength used selfishly. And, most importantly, we wanted to be here when our friends needed help." As the human fleet disappeared back into folded space, returning to their quiet corner of the galaxy, the assembled powers of galactic civilization were left to contemplate a new reality. The species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had revealed themselves as the most advanced civilization in known space. The beings they had mocked for their silence had demonstrated the kind of power that made gods seem modest. But, perhaps most importantly, they had shown that true strength wasn't about the ability to dominate. It was about the wisdom to know when that ability should be used, and the restraint to use it only when absolutely necessary. The humans had been watching from the back of the assembly hall all along. And now the galaxy understood that sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one that looked like prey until the moment it decided to hunt. In the days that followed, as reports of the architect defeat spread throughout galactic civilization, a new understanding emerged. Humanity wasn't seeking to rule or control. They weren't demanding tribute or territories. They were simply asking for the same thing they had always asked for, the right to exist peacefully among their neighbors. But now everyone knew that if anyone threatened that peace, if anyone threatened their neighbors, the quiet humans sitting in the back would stop being quiet. And when that happened, the galaxy would remember why patience was the most terrifying virtue a predator could possess.